Today, let's talk about ears. Like these. This kudu from Zambia can hear well with those ears. When I'm talking with an audience, I would love to have them to have this kind of ears so I would know they're paying attention. But you and I both know too often that's not the case. We don't know if our audience is paying attention just because they have big ears. They've got to be showing us with their body language, like this photo. Look at how this group is physically paying attention, leaning in, responding with their eyes and body language. That's what you want to see. That only happens if they are listening to you. So, how do we get that kind of audience response? How do we know they're listening to us? Well, there's a lot of real basic tips that aren't necessarily easy to make sure you've got them all right, but they're kind of going through the fundamentals of presenting and giving a public speech. When you're talking, are you speaking clearly? That doesn't mean you have the best radio voice out there. I'm saying, have you practiced enough so you're not stumbling over your words? Are you comfortable enough at what you want to say that you feel relaxed and you're not nervous, which can also make your audience check out? Think about your tone of voice. It doesn't mean you have to shout. It actually might mean you need to get soft at some points to draw your audience in. Think about storytelling techniques. How do you set the mood? Sometimes it's speeding up your voice, something you want to get through really quickly, and then pausing, where your audience is suddenly drawn back in from whatever they were distracted by, and they know that you've given them a cue that what you have to say next is really important or hard for you to say. Either way, they're listening. How you speak and present is important. Practicing is important. But I also want to give you a little exercise that helps you think through both sides of the room, you as a presenter and your audience as the audience, to think through how you can help them on your end and how you can be a better audience member yourself. Think about when was the last time you really listened to someone. I mean, listen without thinking about what you wanted to say next, without glancing down at your phone or jumping in to offer your opinion. I'll pause here. Just think, when was the last time you listened like that to someone? For me, this is often a challenge. Now, because I was preparing this presentation, I did this at a lunch with Noah. I sat and listened to him. In fact, I asked, can I keep a little notebook open so if random thoughts come to mind, I can write those things down. And if it's important, we can talk about it later. Or if it's random, it gets it off my mind. And he was totally fine with that. That's a little bit of a hack I've used to help me stay focused so I don't worry about forgetting something that comes to mind. Or I'll catch myself trying to remember that and trying to listen, and I can't do both well. What if I do that and someone says, actually, no, I'd rather you not? This is kind of important, and I feel a little nervous if you're writing things down while I'm talking. Then I don't write anything down. I make myself pay attention and I let myself know you're going to think of things that you're probably going to forget if you're listening well. And that's got to be okay. I also think about a dinner with Matt, same kind of thing. We're talking about family and work and things that are going on. And I was able to just listen. And I felt like I was being a better friend. I wasn't giving myself a pat on the back, but I thought about how many times I've jumped in to share my own story. Like I can relate to that, or to one up what he had to say, to offer a solution to something that maybe he didn't even say was a problem. And this time I just listened. And I think we had a much better conversation. Before this presentation, that had been much harder for me to answer. So don't feel bad if it was a challenge for you. But think about when you listen to someone, truly listening to them. There's a book I'll link in the description called You're Not Listening by Kate Murphy. And I would challenge you to check that book out. It's been one of the most helpful resources for me when it comes to this. But before we finish up, I want to flip it around for you. When was the last time someone really listened to you? When was someone so attentive to what you were saying and whose response was so spot on that you truly felt understood? I'll give you a moment to think about that. For me, it was Nathan. He's a guy who is older than me and has been in my career before and wanted to meet me for breakfast, see how I was doing, and give me a little bit of wisdom. I thought that would mean that we'd sit down to breakfast, and as soon as we began to dig into our food, he would begin to dispense his advice from his years of experience. Instead, he surprised me. He started asking me questions, wanted me to explain and tell a story, and As I shared, I noticed that he really was, he was enjoying his breakfast, but he wasn't like waiting to jump in when he had a moment. He didn't sip his coffee just to hop in when I finished my story and took a bite. He let me talk. And the best part was I knew when I was done and ready for his response that he had been listening, because he didn't just wait and after I finished talking, there was a second of silence and he spoke. I finished talking and he said, okay. And he went on from there. The point was just those 3 or 4 seconds difference show me that he was really listening to me. He really paid attention. And let me tell you, the advice he gave, it stuck with me because of how he listened to what I had to say. I probably can't even tell you all the things that I shared in that breakfast, but I can tell you the advice that he gave me because I wanted to return the favor and listen and pay attention as well as he had been listening to me. And I for sure had my notebook out and was writing down what he had to say because of how valuable it was to me that day. So, how to get your audience to listen to you? Be a good presenter. Use good public speaking skills. Build an engaging presentation. Control what you can in your environment. But most of all, empathize with them. If you're easily distracted when someone's telling a story and then goes off on a little side story, don't tell a side story in your presentation. If you don't like to be shouted at, don't shout in your presentation. If you want people to truly listen, I would argue one of the last things I'll tell you is to prune your presentation. Whether it's a vineyard or a flowering plant, trimming back the branches allows more work for that plant to go into the flowers or the fruit. When you give a presentation, less actually is more. I would argue that most business presentations, most sermons, most talks in general are longer than they need to be. There's way too much filler and people check out. Trim it down, be concise, share what you have to say in less words than you thought you were going to say it, in less time than you thought you were going to say it. And you'll know they were truly listening because when you're done, they will ask follow-up questions because they're still interested and engaged in what you presented. Hey, if this video was helpful, would you give it a like? And if you got a tip of how you help make sure your audience is listening to you, would you leave that in the comments below? If you haven't already, subscribe so you can know when future content comes out. Most of all, the biggest compliment you can give me is when you share this video with your friends, coworkers, classmates, and colleagues so they can benefit from this material as well. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.